The ivory wedding invitation lay on Kate Sterling's mahogany desk, like a beautifully wrapped grenade. She stared at the gold-embossed lettering through the floor-to-ceiling windows of her 42nd floor office, watching the Dallas skyline shimmer in the late afternoon heat. The words seemed to mock her with their elegant script. Richard Blackwood and Amanda Hartwell cordially invite you to celebrate their union. Kate's manicured fingers traced the edge of the cardstock. 3 years. 3 years since Richard had walked out of her life with nothing more than a text message and a forwarded email from his lawyer. 3 years since she'd found out he was already seeing Amanda Hartwell, Daddy's little princess, with a trust fund bigger than most small countries' GDP. Ma'am, her assistant, Jennifer, hovered in the doorway like a nervous bird. The Henderson contract is ready for your signature, and the zoning committee meeting has been moved to 4:30. Kate didn't look up. Cancel everything for the rest of the day. Ma'am, you heard me. Kate's voice was silk over steel. And Jennifer, find out everything you can about Harmony Gardens in Highland Park, guest capacity, vendor lists, security protocols, everything. Jennifer's eyes widened as she recognized the venue name. Every socialite in Dallas knew Harmony Gardens. It was where Kate and Richard had their first date 7 years ago. The bastard wasn't just getting married, he was twisting the knife, after Jennifer scurried away. Kate stood and walked to her private bar, pouring herself 2 fingers of 18-year-old Macallan. The whiskey burned, but not as much as the memory of Richard's last words to her. You'll never find anyone who understands you like I do. Kate, you're too complicated, too demanding. You'll end up alone in that ivory tower of yours. She downed the whiskey in one swallow. Well, Richard was about to learn just how wrong he was. The elevator in Sterling Tower had been acting up for weeks, a minor annoyance that Kate had delegated to building maintenance. She was heading to the parking garage when the damn thing lurched to a stop between the 20th and 19th floors. Perfect, she muttered, jabbing the emergency button. The maintenance panel slid open, and a voice echoed up from below. Hold tight up there. I've got you. Kate checked her Cartier watch. She had exactly 43 minutes to get home, shower, and make it to her dinner with the Dallas Business Council. How long is this going to take? Depends on how patient you are with things that are broken. There was something about the voice, deep, unhurried, tinged with the kind of confidence that didn't need to prove itself. It wasn't the usual stammering deference she got from service workers. The elevator shuddered and began moving again. When the doors opened on the parking level, Kate found herself face to face with the owner of that voice. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with shoulders that filled out his navy work shirt and hands that looked like they'd built things, fixed things, survived things. Dark hair with just enough gray at the temples to suggest wisdom earned the hard way. But it was his eyes that stopped her cold. They were the color of storm clouds, and they looked at her without flinching, without the usual mix of fear and calculation she inspired in most people. You're welcome, he said, wiping his hands on a rag. Kate blinked. Excuse me, for fixing your elevator, most people say thank you. He shouldered his tool bag and started walking toward the service exit. Wait. The word came out sharper than she intended. He turned back, eyebrow raised. What's your name? David Morrison. And you're Kate Sterling, I can tell, because your picture's in the lobby and you've got that look. Oh, what look? Like you own everything you see and you're not particularly impressed with any of it. Any other man would have been fired for that comment. Instead, Kate found herself almost smiling. Are you always this direct with your employers? You're not my employer. I work for Morrison Maintenance. We just have a contract with your building. David adjusted his tool bag. But to answer your question, yeah, I find honesty saves everyone time. Kate studied him. There was something different about David Morrison, something that had nothing to do with his work clothes or his calloused hands. He stood like a man who'd once worn very different clothes, carried himself with the kind of ease that came from being comfortable in any room. Are you married, Mr. Morrison? The question seemed to amuse him. Divorced? Why, children. A daughter, 7 years old. His expression softened slightly. Her name's Sophie. Kate made a decision that would change everything. How would you like to make $45,000 for one night's work? David's storm-gray eyes narrowed. Doing what? Being my date to a wedding. Whose wedding? My ex-fiancé's. A slow smile spread across David's face, not mocking, but understanding. Lady, I fix broken things for a living, but even I know some things are too shattered to repair. I'm not asking you to fix anything, Kate said. I'm asking you to help me prove a point. David was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. What kind of point? That Richard Blackwood was the biggest mistake I ever made, and letting him go was the smartest thing I ever did. And you need me because you're not like the men in my world. You don't want anything from me. You don't need my approval, and you sure as hell don't seem impressed by my money or my reputation. Kate stepped closer. You look like a man who's been through hell and came out stronger. That's exactly the kind of man who would drive Richard crazy with jealousy. David laughed a rich, genuine sound. You want to hire me to make your ex jealous? I want to hire you to remind him what he lost. And what if he doesn't care? What if he's genuinely happy with his new bride? Kate's smile was sharp as broken glass. Trust me, Mr. Morrison, Richard Blackwood has never been genuinely happy about anything. He collects trophies, wives, businesses, real estate. He left me because he thought he'd found a better trophy. I want him to see what a real man looks like standing next to me. David was quiet for a long moment. $45,000. That was almost exactly what he needed for Sophie's surgery, plus enough left over for 3 months of rent and maybe some decent clothes for job interviews. But this woman was clearly playing with fire, and he'd been burned enough for one lifetime. One night, he said finally. One night. No strings attached. I'm not your boyfriend. I'm not your rebound. I'm not your anything except your date for one evening. Kate nodded. Agreed. And I pick my own clothes. I don't do costumes. Fair enough. David extended his hand. Then you've got yourself a deal. Ms. Sterling. Kate shook it, surprised by the callous strength of his grip. It's Kate and Mr. Morrison. This is going to be fun. David's apartment was a third-floor walk-up in a neighborhood that had seen better decades. The stairs creaked. The hallway smelled like someone's dinner and someone else's disappointment, and the lock on his door required exactly the right combination of jiggling and prayer. But inside, the small space was clean and warm. Sophie's artwork covered the refrigerator. Her books were stacked neatly on a shelf made from cinder blocks and pine boards, and the whole place had the feeling of a life being carefully, lovingly maintained on a shoestring budget. Sophie looked up from her coloring book when David walked in. She was small for 7, with dark hair like his and eyes that seemed too old for her face. The surgery scar on her chest was barely visible beneath her Disney princess t-shirt, but David saw it every time he looked at her. Daddy! She scrambled off the couch and launched herself at him. Mrs. Chen made cookies and she gave me 3. 3 whole cookies. Did you save me any? Sophie giggled. Maybe. David knelt down to her level. Soph, I need to tell you something. I have to work this Saturday night. Her face fell slightly. But Saturday is movie night. I know, kiddo, but this is a special job, and it pays really well. Well enough for... He paused, not wanting to get her hopes up about the surgery. Well enough for a lot of things. Sophie studied his face with the seriousness that kids develop when they've spent too much time in hospitals. Is it a good job or a bad job? It's complicated. I'm going to help a lady with something important. Is she nice? David thought about Kate Sterling's sharp smile and storm-cloud eyes. I think she's trying to be... Sophie nodded solemnly. Okay, but you have to promise to come back. The words hit David like a punch to the chest. Sophie had developed abandonment anxiety after her mother left, understandable. Given that her mom had walked out the door one Tuesday morning and never came back. Hey! David cupped her small face in his hands. I will always come back to you. Always. That's a promise I'll never break. Sophie smiled and hugged him tight. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, little bird. Later, after Sophie was asleep, David sat at his kitchen table with Kate's business card and a cup of instant coffee. He'd looked her up online, Catherine Sterling, CEO of Sterling Properties, estimated net worth somewhere north of $50 million. She was beautiful in that polished, untouchable way that money could buy. But in the elevator, he'd seen something else, a flicker of loneliness that looked familiar. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "This is Kate. What's your shirt size? My stylist needs to know." David stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back large. "But I meant what I said about picking my own clothes." Her response came immediately, stubborn. "I like that. Meet me tomorrow at 2 p.m. Address attached." The address was in Highland Park, Dallas's most exclusive neighborhood. David shook his head. What the hell had he gotten himself into? Morrison and Associates had once occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming office tower in downtown Dallas. David Morrison had been 30 years old when his architectural firm designed its first skyscraper. 32 when they won the contract for the new Dallas Museum of Contemporary Art. 34 when they were featured on the cover of Architectural Digest. He'd been 35 when it all came crashing down. Now, as he stood outside Kate Sterling's Highland Park mansion. David tried not to think about the last time he'd been in this neighborhood. The house was a masterpiece of modern architecture, all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows that somehow managed to look both imposing and inviting. The kind of house he used to design before he learned that sometimes the people who commissioned beautiful things were the same people who destroyed them. The front door opened before he could ring the bell. Kate stood there in jeans and a cashmere sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders, without the armor of her business suit. She looked younger, more approachable, almost vulnerable. "You found it," she said, stepping aside to let him in. "Hard to miss." David took in the soaring ceilings, the carefully curated art, the furniture that probably cost more than most people made in a year. "Nice place." "It's too big," Kate said, leading him through the foyer. "I bought it right after Richard and I broke up. I think I was trying to prove something." "Did it work?" Kate's laugh was rueful. "No, it just echoed more." She led him to a sitting room that managed to feel cozy despite its obvious expense. A fire crackled in the fireplace, and late afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows. "Can I get you something to drink, coffee, beer? Something stronger?" "Coffee's fine." Kate disappeared into what he assumed was the kitchen, leaving David alone to study the room. The artwork was impressive but impersonal, the kind of pieces that said, "I have good taste in money," without revealing anything about the person who'd chosen them. There were no family photos, no personal mementos, nothing that suggested Kate Sterling had a life outside of business. She returned with 2 cups of coffee and settled into the chair across from him. "So, David Morrison, tell me about yourself." "Not much to tell. I fix things. I raise my daughter. I try to keep my head above water." Kate sipped her coffee, studying him over the rim of her cup. "You weren't always in maintenance." It wasn't a question. David set down his coffee and leaned back. "What makes you say that? The way you carry yourself, the way you talk. You've been in boardrooms before." David was quiet for a long moment. "Yeah, I have." "What happened?" The question hung in the air between them. David had told this story exactly twice, once to his lawyer and once to his therapist. But something about Kate's direct gaze made him want to be honest. "I was an architect, had my own firm, Morrison and Associates. We specialized in commercial and public buildings, museums, office complexes, that kind of thing. We were doing well, growing fast, maybe too fast." Kate waited. "I had a partner, Marcus Webb. We'd been friends since architecture school, started the company together. I trusted him completely." David's jaw tightened. "That was my first mistake. He betrayed you. He sold me out, made a deal with a development company to take over our biggest contract, a $200 million museum project. The buyout was legal. Technically, Marcus had power of attorney for certain business decisions, and he used it to essentially sell my half of the company out from under me." Kate's eyes flashed. "That's theft." "Yeah, but the kind that happens in boardrooms with lawyers and contracts, The kind that's perfectly legal if you have the right connections and enough money to make it stick. What did you do? David laughed, but there was no humor in it. I fought, spent everything I had on lawyers, trying to prove fraud. But Marcus had covered his tracks well, and the development company that bought us out had deeper pockets than I could ever dream of. After 2 years of legal battles, I was broke. My reputation was destroyed, and my wife had left me. Your wife left you because of the business. Sarah left because she didn't sign up for struggle. She married an up-and-coming architect with a bright future, not a broken man sleeping on his daughter's floor because he couldn't afford rent. David's voice was matter-of-fact, but Kate could hear the old pain underneath. She took Sophie with her initially, took me another year to get joint custody, and another year after that to get primary custody when Sarah decided being a single mother was too much work. Kate was quiet for a long moment. I'm sorry. Don't be. If any of it hadn't happened, I wouldn't have Sophie full-time now, and she's the best thing in my life. But you lost everything else. David met her eyes. Yeah, I did. But you know what I learned when you've lost everything. You stop being afraid of losing anything. It's strangely liberating. Kate stood and walked to the window, her back to him. The development company that bought you out, do you remember the name? Sterling Development Partners? Kate went very still. Kate, you okay? She turned slowly, her face pale. David, Sterling Development Partners is a subsidiary of Sterling Properties. The coffee cup slipped from David's hand, shattering on the hardwood floor. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Kate stared at David, watching the color drain from his face as the implications sank in. Her company, her family's company, had destroyed his life. I didn't know, she said quickly. David, I swear to you, I had no idea. David stood slowly, his movements careful and controlled. Your company destroyed mine. My father's company. I wasn't even in charge. Then I was still learning the business, following his lead on everything. Kate's words tumbled out in a rush. But yes, Sterling Properties was responsible. David's laugh was bitter. Jesus, of all the elevator shafts in all the buildings in Dallas, you had to walk into mine. David, please. Please, what? His voice was quiet, but Kate could hear the rage simmering underneath. Please pretend it doesn't matter. Please forget that your family stole 6 years of my life. I want to make it right. You can't make it right. The words exploded out of him. You can't give me back my company, my reputation, my marriage. You can't give Sophie back the years when she wondered why Daddy couldn't afford her medicine or why we had to move apartments every 6 months. Kate flinched as if he'd slapped her. You're right. I can't give you any of that back. But I can. What, write me a check, throw some guilt money at the problem and call it even? I can expose what my father did. I can make sure Marcus Webb and everyone else involved pays for what they did to you. David stared at her. Why would you do that? Because it's right. Because what happened to you was wrong. And I won't be complicit in covering it up just because it might hurt my family's business. And the wedding. This whole arrangement. Kate was quiet for a long moment. That's up to you. If you never want to see me again, I understand. But if you still want to go through with it, she met his eyes. $45,000 could go a long way toward rebuilding your life. David sank back into his chair, running his hands through his hair. Sophie needs surgery. Her heart condition, the doctors say she has maybe 6 months before it becomes critical. The surgery costs exactly $43,000. Kate's breath caught. David, so yeah, I need your money. I hate that I need it. I hate that it's coming from the people who put me in this position. But I need it. He looked up at her, his eyes hard. So if you want me to put on a tux and play your devoted boyfriend for a night, I'll do it. But don't expect me to pretend we're friends. Kate nodded slowly. I understand. Do you? Because this isn't some romantic movie where the rich girl and the broken guy fall in love and live happily ever after. This is a business transaction. You pay me to make your ex-boyfriend jealous. I take your money and use it to save my daughter's life. That's all this is. Okay. David stood again. I should go. David, wait. Kate's voice was soft. For what it's worth, I am sorry, and I meant what I said about making it right. Regardless of what happens with the wedding, I'm going to investigate what my father did to your company. If there's any way to get you justice, I'll find it. David paused at the door. Justice won't bring back the last 6 years. No, Kate said quietly, but it might make the next 6 better. After David left, Kate stood alone in her too-big house, surrounded by expensive things that suddenly felt like monuments to other people's suffering. She walked to her home office and opened her laptop, pulling up the Sterling Properties acquisition files from 6 years ago. It took her an hour to find the Morrison and Associates deal, buried in a folder labeled Subsidiary Acquisitions Archived. The paperwork was all there. Marcus Webb's signature, the power of attorney documents, the financial records showing the buyout price. And there, at the bottom of the final contract, was her father's signature authorizing the deal. William Sterling had known exactly what he was doing when he destroyed David Morrison's company. The question was why. Kate reached for her phone and dialed her father's direct line. Catherine. William's voice was warm with paternal affection. This is a pleasant surprise. How are you, sweetheart? I'm looking at some old acquisition files. Dad, from 2018. There's a deal here for a company called Morrison and Associates that I don't understand. The silence on the other end of the line stretched just a beat too long. Morrison and Associates, I'm not sure I recall. Cut the shit. Dad. Kate's voice went cold. I've got the paperwork right here. You bought out an architectural firm through Sterling Development Partners, essentially forcing the owner into bankruptcy. I want to know why. Another pause. Catherine, some business decisions are complicated. Perhaps we should discuss this in person. No, we're discussing it now. David Morrison was a respected architect with a successful firm. What threat could he possibly have posed to Sterling Properties? David Morrison was building something that would have cost us millions, William said finally. The museum project he was working on, it was supposed to be built on land we'd been quietly acquiring for a mixed-use development. If Morrison had completed that project, it would have tied up that entire city block for decades. Kate felt sick. So you destroyed his life for a real estate deal. I protected our family's interests. Sometimes that requires difficult choices. Difficult choices, Kate's voice rose. Dad, you ruined an innocent man's life and made you one of the wealthiest women in Texas in the process. William snapped. Don't lecture me about morality. Catherine, everything you have, everything you are, is built on decisions like that one. The line went dead. Kate stared at her phone, her father's words echoing in her mind. Everything you have, everything you are, is built on decisions like that one. She looked around her expensive house, thought about her successful company, her powerful position in Dallas society. How much of it was built on other people's pain? How many David Morrisons had her family destroyed over the years? Kate made another decision that would change everything. She opened her laptop and began typing an email to her head of legal affairs. I need you to prepare a full forensic audit of all Sterling Properties acquisitions from 2015 to 2020. I want to know every deal we've made, every company we've bought, and every person who might have been harmed in the process. This is priority 1. Then she opened a new email and typed David's name in the recipient field. She stared at the blank message for a long time before finally typing, I know you have no reason to trust me, but I meant what I said about making this right. The wedding is in 4 days. Whether you show up or not, I'll understand. But either way, I'm going to make sure you get the justice you deserve. She hit send before she could change her mind. David sat in the parking lot outside Sophie's school, Kate's email open on his phone. Through the windshield, he could see his daughter on the playground, laughing with her friends as if she didn't have a care in the world. As if she didn't know that her father was drowning and the only life preserver being offered came from the people who'd pushed him into the water in the first place. His phone buzzed with a text from his ex-wife, Sarah Hurd, through mutual friends that you're seeing someone new. Rich. Apparently. Good for you. Maybe Sophie can finally have some stability. David deleted the message without responding. Sarah had no right to comment on his life. Not after walking away when things got hard. But her words stung because they hit close to home. Sophie deserved stability, deserved a father who could provide for her without having to grovel for scraps from his former destroyers. The school bell rang, and Sophie came running toward the car, her backpack bouncing behind her. "Daddy, guess what happened today?" "What happened?" "Little bird. Jenny Thompson said her dad makes more money than you, so I told her that money doesn't matter because you give the best hugs in the whole world." Sophie climbed into her booster seat, chattering away. "And then I told her about your buildings that you used to make, and she said her dad never made any buildings at all." David's throat tightened. "Sophie, you don't have to defend me to other kids." "I know, but I wanted to." She looked at him seriously. "Daddy, are we poor?" The question hit him like a truck. "Why do you ask?" "Because Jenny said only poor people live in apartments. And we live in an apartment, but Mrs. Chen lives in an apartment too, and she has the nicest cookies, so I don't think poor is necessarily bad." David turned in his seat to face her. "Sophie, listen to me. We don't have as much money as some people, but we have everything we need. We have each other. We have a safe place to live. We have food and clothes and books and toys. And most importantly, we have love. Do you feel loved?" Sophie nodded vigorously. "More than anyone in the whole world." "Then we're not poor. We're rich in all the ways that matter." As they drove home, David thought about Kate's email. "Whether you show up or not, I'll understand. But either way, I'm going to make sure you get the justice you deserve." The thing was, he wasn't sure he wanted justice anymore. Justice wouldn't change the fact that he was 35 years old and starting over from scratch. Justice wouldn't erase the years of struggle, the nights he'd fallen asleep wondering if he was failing his daughter. But $45,000 could save Sophie's life. And maybe, just maybe, it could give him enough breathing room to figure out what came next. When they got home, David found a package waiting outside their door. Inside was a suit bag with a note. "I know you said you'd pick your own clothes, but I thought you might like options. If you hate it, we'll return it and find something else." Inside the bag was a perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit, Italian wool, with a price tag that made David's eyes water. There was also a white dress shirt, a silver tie, and a pair of leather shoes that probably cost more than David's rent. Sophie peeked into the bag. "Wow, Daddy, you're going to look like a prince." "It's just for work." "Soph, I know, but still." She fingered the silk tie. "The lady must really need your help if she bought you prince clothes." David looked at his daughter, 7 years old and wiser than she had any right to be. "Yeah, little bird. I think maybe she does." That night, after Sophie was asleep, David tried on the suit. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for him. He looked in the bathroom mirror and for a moment, he saw a ghost of the man he used to be, the successful architect, the rising star, the man who'd once had the world at his feet. Then he caught sight of the framed photo on his dresser, him and Sophie at the zoo last month. Both of them grinning at the camera with cotton candy sticky faces, and remembered who he was now. A father, a survivor, a man who'd learned that the only thing that really mattered was the love of one small girl who thought he hung the moon. David pulled out his phone and typed a response to Kate's email. "I'll be there, but we do this my way, no pretending. No acting like we're something we're not. I'll play your boyfriend for one night, but I won't lie about who I am or where I come from." Kate's response came within minutes. "I wouldn't want you to. Thank you, David, for everything." 3 days later, David Morrison stood in front of his bathroom mirror, adjusting the silver tie that probably cost more than his monthly grocery budget. In the next room, he could hear Sophie singing along to her favorite Disney movie, her voice sweet and clear and absolutely perfect. "Daddy, you look beautiful." Sophie appeared in the doorway, her eyes wide with admiration. "Beautiful?" David laughed. "I think you mean handsome." "No, I mean beautiful. Like when the prince saves the princess in my movies?" Sophie tilted her head thoughtfully. "Are you going to save the lady tonight?" David knelt down to her level. I don't think she needs saving. Little bird, I think she's pretty good at taking care of herself. Then why does she need you? It was a fair question. David smoothed down Sophie's hair, thinking about Kate Sterling and her empty mansion and her loneliness that she wore like armor. Sometimes people need someone to stand beside them, even when they're strong enough to stand alone. Sophie nodded solemnly. Like how I need you to check for monsters under my bed, even though I know there aren't any monsters exactly like that. Mrs. Chen knocked on the door, then their elderly neighbor who'd agreed to watch Sophie for the evening, as David kissed his daughter goodbye. Sophie grabbed his hand. Daddy, when you come home tonight, will you tell me about the wedding? I want to know if the lady in the pretty dress gets her happy ending. David's chest tightened. Sure, little bird. I'll tell you all about it. As he walked to the car service Kate had sent, David found himself hoping that Sophie would have a happy ending to look forward to. Because despite everything, despite the history between their families, despite the business arrangement, despite his best intentions to keep this simple, he was starting to care about what happened to Kate Sterling. And that, he realized, might be the most dangerous thing of all. The Blacktown car pulled up to the Harmony Gardens estate just as the sun was setting over Highland Park, painting the Texas sky in shades of gold and crimson. David sat in the back seat, his hands steady on his knees despite the storm of emotions churning in his chest. Through the tinted windows, he could see the wedding venue in all its orchestrated splendor, white roses climbing marble columns, strings of lights twinkling like captured stars, and valets in crisp uniforms directing a parade of luxury vehicles. Sir, the driver's voice was respectful. Ms. Sterling asked me to remind you that she'll meet you at the main entrance. David nodded, checking his watch. 7 o'clock sharp, whatever else Kate Sterling might be. She was punctual. The car door opened, and David stepped out into the warm evening air. The estate was even more impressive up close, a sprawling mansion that looked like it had been transplanted directly from a European castle, complete with manicured gardens that probably employed more people than most small businesses. And there, standing at the top of the wide stone steps, was Kate. David's breath caught in his throat. She wore a midnight blue dress that seemed to capture and reflect the fading light, its elegant lines showcasing her figure without being ostentatious. Her dark hair was swept up in a sophisticated chignon, and diamond earrings caught the glow from the estate's lanterns. But it was her expression that struck him most composed and confident on the surface. But with something vulnerable flickering in her eyes, she descended the steps with fluid grace, and David found himself remembering how to breathe. You clean up nice, Mr. Morrison, Kate said as she approached, her voice carrying just a hint of nervousness beneath its usual self-assurance. You're not so bad yourself, David replied, offering his arm. Ready for this? Kate slipped her hand through his elbow, and he was surprised by how right it felt. As ready as one can be for walking into the lion's den with a stranger who has every reason to hate me. I don't hate you, David said quietly as they walked toward the entrance. I hate the situation we're in, but I don't hate you. Kate glanced up at him. That's more generous than I deserve. Maybe, but tonight isn't about what either of us deserves. It's about putting on a show and collecting a paycheck. They paused at the entrance, where guests were being announced by a man in formal attire who looked like he'd stepped out of a Jane Austen novel. The sounds of cocktail conversation and classical music drifted from inside, punctuated by the occasional burst of laughter. Last chance to back out, Kate murmured. David looked down at her, this complicated, powerful, lonely woman who was paying him $45,000 to pretend to be her boyfriend for one night. He thought about Sophie, asleep in their tiny apartment with Mrs. Chen watching over her, and about the surgery that would save his daughter's life. I'm not going anywhere, he said. The announcer's voice rang out, Ms. Catherine Sterling and Mr. David Morrison, and they walked into the belly of the beast. The main ballroom of Harmony Gardens was a study in understated elegance, crystal chandeliers, casting warm light over round tables draped in ivory silk, centerpieces of white roses and baby's breath, and a live orchestra playing soft jazz in one corner. The guest list read like a who's who of Dallas society oil executives, tech moguls, real estate titans, and old money families whose names grace buildings and hospital wings throughout the city. David had been in rooms like this before. Back when Morrison and Associates was the rising star of Dallas architecture, he recognized some faces, saw a few people who had once courted his business, others who had quietly distanced themselves when his star fell. The familiar sting of recognition and rejection warred in his chest. Kate, a woman in her 60s, approached with arms outstretched, dripping in diamonds and genuine warmth. "Darling, you look absolutely radiant." "And who is this handsome gentleman?" Kate's smile was perfectly calibrated, warm but not revealing. "Margaret, I'd like you to meet David Morrison." "David, this is Margaret Pemberton, one of Dallas's most accomplished philanthropists." David extended his hand with easy confidence. "A pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Pemberton." Margaret's eyes lit up with curiosity. "Morrison, that name sounds familiar. Are you in business here in Dallas?" "I'm in construction," David replied smoothly. It wasn't technically a lie. "I work with my hands." "How refreshing," Margaret beamed. "So many of the men in our circle have never done an honest day's work in their lives." "Kate, darling, wherever did you find him?" "He literally dropped into my life," Kate said, and David caught the hint of genuine amusement in her voice. "I knew immediately he was special." As Margaret moved on to greet other guests, Kate leaned closer to David. "Thank you for not making it awkward. Did you think I would? I thought you might enjoy watching me squirm." David considered this. "The night is young." They made their way through the crowd, Kate introducing David with just enough mystery to pique curiosity without providing real information. David found himself falling into an old rhythm. The social graces he'd learned during his years in Dallas's business elite came back like muscle memory. He knew how to make small talk without saying anything meaningful, how to project confidence without arrogance, how to make people feel important while revealing nothing about himself. But he also noticed things that the old David Morrison might have missed. The way conversations paused when Kate approached, then resumed with slightly forced enthusiasm. The calculating looks some of the men gave her not attraction, but assessment, as if they were evaluating her as a potential acquisition. The way the women smiled at her with their mouths but not their eyes. Kate Sterling, he realized, was respected and feared in equal measure, but she wasn't particularly liked. "David Morrison," the voice came from behind them, low and familiar. David turned to find Marcus Webb standing there with a champagne flute in his hand and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. David's blood turned to ice. Marcus looked prosperous, expensive suit, manicured nails, the soft look of a man who'd spent the last 6 years eating well and sleeping soundly. He was shorter than David remembered, with thinning hair and the beginning of a paunch, but his eyes held the same calculating intelligence that had once made him a brilliant architect and a devastating betrayer. "Marcus," David's voice was carefully neutral. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I could say the same." Marcus's gaze flicked to Kate, and David saw recognition dawn. "Miss Sterling, what a coincidence." Kate's hand tightened almost imperceptibly on David's arm. "Mr. Webb, isn't it? I believe we've met." "Indeed," Marcus smiled wider. "Though I must say, I'm surprised to see you two together." "David, I had no idea you'd moved in such elevated circles." The insult was wrapped in politeness, but David heard it clearly. So did Kate. "David has many hidden talents," Kate said smoothly. "I find successful men often do." Marcus's smile faltered slightly. "Successful? Well, I suppose success is relative, though I have to ask. David, how's the maintenance business treating you?" The words hit their mark. David felt the familiar burn of humiliation, the sting of being reduced to his current circumstances by the man who'd put him there. But before he could respond, Kate stepped forward. "I'm sorry, Mr. Webb, but I'm afraid I don't understand the reference to maintenance." Marcus's eyes glittered with malicious pleasure. "Oh, you don't know David here used to be an architect, quite a good one. Actually, But things didn't work out, and now he fixes elevators and such. Honest work. Of course, but rather a come down from designing million-dollar buildings? The silence that followed was heavy with tension. David felt exposed, diminished, exactly as Marcus had intended. This was why he'd avoided Dallas society for 6 years this moment, when his past and present collided in public. When he had to stand there and take the humiliation. But then Kate spoke, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden quiet around them. "How fascinating," she said, her tone conversational but with an undertone of steel. "So you're telling me that David designed million-dollar buildings? That's quite impressive." Marcus blinked, clearly not expecting this response. "Well, yes, but..." "And now he works with his hands, doing the kind of skilled labor that keeps our city running," Kate continued. "My goodness, David, you really are a Renaissance man." She turned back to Marcus with a smile that could have cut glass. "You know, Mr. Webb, I've found that men who take pride in other people's misfortunes usually have very little to be proud of themselves. Thank you for the history lesson. Though it just makes David even more impressive to me." Marcus's face reddened. "I wasn't trying to..." "Of course you weren't," Kate said dismissively. "David, darling, I believe I see the bride and groom. Shall we go pay our respects?" As they walked away, David was acutely aware of the whispered conversations erupting in their wake. But he was also aware of something else, the protective fury radiating from the woman beside him, in the way she defended him without hesitation or embarrassment. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what? Stating facts." Kate's voice was still tight with anger. "That man is a snake. You didn't have to do that. Defend me, I mean..." Kate stopped walking and turned to face him. "Yes, I did. Because first of all, there's nothing shameful about honest work. And second, because I may not know all the details of what happened between you two, but I know enough to recognize a guilty conscience when I see one." David stared at her, something shifting in his chest. "Kate, Mr. Morrison." They turned to find a young woman approaching, blonde, delicate, with the kind of ethereal beauty that graced magazine covers and charity galas. This had to be Amanda Hartwell, the bride. "Amanda," Kate said smoothly. "Congratulations. You look absolutely lovely." Amanda's smile was warm, but there was something brittle around the edges. "Thank you so much for coming. Kate, I know this might be awkward." "Not at all. I'm very happy for you and Richard." Kate's performance was flawless. "Amanda, I'd like you to meet David Morrison." "David, this is Amanda Hartwell. Sorry, Amanda Blackwood now." David took Amanda's offered hand. "Congratulations, Mrs. Blackwood. It's a beautiful wedding." "Thank you." Amanda's eyes lingered on David's face with open curiosity. "Have we met before? You look familiar." "I don't think so," David replied. "I have one of those faces." Amanda laughed, a sound like silver bells. "Well, you're certainly handsome enough to be memorable." She glanced between David and Kate. "You two make a lovely couple. How long have you been together?" "Not long," Kate said, "but sometimes you just know. Don't you?" "Oh, absolutely." Amanda's expression grew wistful. "When I met Richard, I knew within a week that he was the one. There's just something about finding the right person." Her voice trailed off, and David caught a flicker of something in her eyes without regret. It was gone so quickly he might have imagined it. "Speaking of Richard," Kate said, "where is the groom? I'd love to congratulate him." "Oh, he's around somewhere. Probably talking business, you know how he is." Amanda's laugh seemed forced. "I swear, sometimes I think he loves his law practice more than he loves me." An uncomfortable silence fell. Then Amanda brightened with obvious effort. "But enough about us, David. What do you do?" Before David could answer, a new voice cut through the conversation. "Amanda, darling, there you are." Richard Blackwood approached with the confident stride of a man who owned every room he entered. He was tall, silver-haired, and distinguished in the way that expensive suits and good breeding could create. But there was something cold about his blue eyes, something calculating in his smile. "Richard," Kate's voice was perfectly controlled. "Congratulations." Richard's gaze flicked over her briefly before settling on David with obvious assessment. Thank you, Kate. And you are David Morrison, David said. Extending his hand, Richard's handshake was firm, competitive. Morrison, why does that name sound familiar? I was just wondering the same thing, Amanda said. David, are you sure we haven't met? I'm sure, David replied, but he was studying Richard's face, and he saw the moment recognition flickered in the lawyer's eyes. Morrison, Richard repeated slowly. The architect, Morrison and Associates. David's jaw tightened. Former architect? Of course. Richard's smile was sharp. I remember now. Quite a fall from grace, wasn't it? Though I suppose everyone finds their level eventually. The insult was delivered with surgical precision, designed to cut deep while maintaining plausible deniability. Amanda looked confused, clearly sensing the tension, but not understanding its source. Kate's hand found David's arm again, her touch steady and grounding. I find that men who've overcome adversity are far more interesting than those who've never been tested, she said. Don't you think so? Richard, perhaps. Richard's attention shifted to Kate. Though I have to say, Kate, I'm surprised. This seems rather beneath your usual standards. The words hung in the air like a slap. Amanda gasped softly. The conversations around them faltered as people sensed the confrontation brewing. David felt something dangerous rising in his chest, a fury that had been banked for 6 years, waiting for exactly this moment. But before he could speak, Kate stepped forward. My standards. Her voice was soft, but it carried clearly. Richard, let me tell you about my standards. I value loyalty, which you wouldn't understand. I value integrity, ditto. And I value men who don't break promises, which rules you out entirely. Richard's face darkened. Kate, I'm not finished. Kate's voice rose slightly. You want to talk about standards. My standard now is men who don't run away when things get difficult. Men who don't abandon the people they claim to love for the sake of social climbing. Men who don't mistake a trust fund for a personality. The ballroom had gone quiet around them. Amanda looked stricken. Richard's composure was cracking. You're making a scene, Richard said through gritted teeth. Am I? Kate looked around at the watching faces. I'm simply having a conversation about standards, though I suppose public accountability might feel like a scene to someone who prefers to operate in shadows. David placed a gentle hand on Kate's lower back. Kate, he said quietly, I think they get the point. She looked up at him, and David saw the storm in her eyes beginning to calm. She took a breath, then turned back to Richard and Amanda with renewed composure. I'm sorry, she said to Amanda. That was inappropriate on your wedding day. Richard and I have some unresolved history, but that's no excuse for poor manners. Amanda nodded, looking relieved. Of course. Emotions run high at weddings. Richard, however, wasn't ready to let it go. Some history, is that what you call it? What would you call it? Kate asked. I'd call it 3 years of your inability to commit to anything that didn't come with a profit margin. The accusation hit its mark. David felt Kate stiffen beside him, but this time, he was the one who stepped forward. That's interesting, David said, his voice conversational. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're the one who married for profit. He glanced meaningfully at Amanda's diamond-encrusted wedding ring, her designer dress, the obvious wealth surrounding them. But what do I know? I'm just a maintenance guy. Richard's face went red. How dare you? How dare I point out the obvious? David's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. You left Kate for someone whose family could advance your career. That's not love. That's a business transaction. And if you're going to insult both Kate and me in public, you should probably make sure you have the moral high ground first. The silence that followed was deafening. Amanda looked like she wanted to disappear. Several guests had their phones out, clearly recording the confrontation. Finally, Richard found his voice. You have no idea what you're talking about. Don't I? David stepped closer. See, the thing about working maintenance is that you become invisible. People say things around you that they'd never say otherwise, and what I've heard tonight is very interesting. It was a bluff. David hadn't heard anything, but Richard's face went pale, and David knew he'd hit something. What are you implying? Richard demanded. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. You married Amanda for her connections and her money. You invited Kate here tonight to humiliate her. And you've spent the last 10 minutes trying to humiliate me because you're threatened by the fact that she moved on with someone who doesn't need her money to feel like a man. Richard took a step forward, his hands clenched into fists. You son of a... Richard. Amanda's voice was sharp. Stop, please. The groom turned to his bride, and David saw something pass between them, a look of understanding that spoke of conversations held in private, doubts shared in whispers. You're right, Amanda said quietly, and everyone leaned in to hear her. This is my wedding day, and I won't have it ruined by whatever this is. She looked at Kate with something that might have been sympathy. Kate, thank you for coming. David, it was nice to meet you. Richard, I think we should continue greeting our guests. Amanda took Richard's arm and guided him away, but not before David caught the look she gave her new husband, disappointed, perhaps even disgusted. As the crowd began to disperse, conversations resuming in hushed tones, Kate and David found themselves alone in the middle of the ballroom. Well, Kate said after a moment, that went better than expected. David stared at her. Better we just caused a scene at a wedding. No, Richard caused a scene. We just refused to be victims of it. Kate's eyes were bright with something that looked like exhilaration. Did you see Amanda's face? She's finally seeing her husband for what he really is. And that makes you happy. Kate considered this. No, I don't wish unhappiness on anyone, not even Richard. But I'm glad she knows the truth before it's too late to do something about it. David shook his head. You're something else. Kate Sterling. Is that good or bad? Before David could answer, they were interrupted by the approach of an older man in an expensive suit. He was tall and distinguished, with silver hair and the kind of commanding presence that came from decades of wielding power. Catherine? The man's voice was deep, cultured, and distinctly displeased. Kate straightened, her expression suddenly guarded. Hello, Dad. David's blood chilled. This was William Sterling, the man who had destroyed his life. William's gaze shifted to David, and there was no recognition there, only the cold assessment of a predator evaluating potential prey. And who might this be? William asked. This is David Morrison. Kate said, David, my father. William Sterling. David extended his hand, fighting every instinct that told him to walk away. Mr. Sterling. William's handshake was firm, perfunctory. Morrison, are you in business here in Dallas? I was, David replied. I used to run an architectural firm. Really, which firm? David met the older man's eyes. Morrison and Associates. The reaction was subtle but unmistakable. William's grip tightened slightly, his eyes sharpened, and David saw the moment when recognition hit. Morrison and Associates, William repeated slowly. That name is familiar. It should be, David said quietly. Your company bought us out 6 years ago. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Kate was watching both men with growing tension, clearly sensing the undercurrents but not understanding their full significance. Ah, yes, William said finally. I remember now. That was unfortunate business. Unfortunate for who? David asked. William's smile was cold. For everyone involved, I imagine, though sometimes these things are necessary for the greater good. The greater good! David's voice remained level, but Kate could hear the anger simmering underneath. Is that what you call destroying people's lives? I call it business, Mr. Morrison. Sometimes individual interests must be sacrificed for larger objectives. Surely a man of your intelligence understands that. What I understand, David said, is that you stole 6 years of my life and nearly cost me my daughter. William's expression didn't change. I'm afraid I don't know what you mean. Dad, Kate's voice was sharp. What is he talking about? William looked at his daughter with something that might have been disappointment. Catherine, surely you don't believe this man's sob story. Failed businessmen always look for someone else to blame for their failures. David felt the old rage rising, the helpless fury of a man who'd been destroyed by people with more money and power than conscience. But this time, he wasn't alone. It's not a sob story, Kate said quietly. It's the truth. I've seen the files. Dad, I know what you did to Morrison and Associates. William's composure cracked slightly. Catherine, we should discuss this privately. No! Kate's voice was steel. We should discuss it right here, right now. David deserves to hear you admit what you did to him. I did what was necessary to protect our family's interests, William said, his voice rising slightly. That museum project Morrison was working on would have cost Sterling Properties millions in lost revenue. Sometimes difficult decisions must be made. Difficult decisions. Kate's voice was incredulous. Dad, you destroyed an innocent man's life for a real estate deal and made you one of the wealthiest women in Texas in the process. William snapped. Don't lecture me about morality. Catherine, everything you have, this dress, this jewelry, your fancy car, your precious company, it's all built on decisions like that one. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Kate stared at her father, and David saw something break in her expression. Get out, she said quietly. I beg your pardon. Get out. Leave. Now. Kate's voice was shaking with fury. Before I do something that will embarrass this family far more than a public argument. William looked between his daughter and David, his expression calculating. Catherine, you're making a mistake. This man is using you to get revenge against our family. Can't you see that the only mistake I made was trusting you for 38 years? Kate replied. David didn't seek me out, I found him. And if he wanted revenge, he certainly earned the right to it. William's face darkened. If you pursue this course of action, Catherine, there will be consequences for both of you. Is that a threat? David asked, stepping closer to Kate. It's a statement of fact, William replied. I've destroyed better men than you. Morrison, don't think for a moment that I won't do it again. You can't destroy what's already been destroyed, David said, but you can try to rebuild it, and that's exactly what I intend to do. William looked at his daughter one last time. Catherine, when you come to your senses, you know where to find me. He turned and walked away, leaving Kate and David standing in the middle of the ballroom as conversations swirled around them. Kate was shaking with anger, with shock, with something David couldn't quite identify. I'm sorry, she said without looking at him. I'm so sorry, David, for all of it. David studied her face, the woman who'd hired him to make her ex-boyfriend jealous, who'd defended him against his former partner's cruelty, who'd just publicly confronted her own father over his crimes. Kate, he said gently, look at me. She raised her eyes to his, and he saw tears threatening to spill over. This isn't your fault, he said. You were just a kid when it happened. You couldn't have stopped it. But I benefited from it. Everything I have. She gestured around them helplessly. It's all built on what they took from you. David was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that surprised them both. So let's build something better. Kate blinked. What? You heard me. Your father was right about one thing. I can't get back what I lost. But maybe we can create something new. Something that doesn't hurt people. Something that helps them instead. You're talking about business partnership. I'm talking about justice. Real justice. Not revenge. David looked around the ballroom, at the wealthy guests who'd watched their drama unfold with fascination and judgment. These people think they're untouchable. Your father thinks he can destroy lives without consequences. Maybe it's time someone proved them wrong. Kate stared at him. You want to take on my father, David. You have no idea how powerful he is, how far his reach extends. Then I'll need someone who knows his weaknesses, David said. Someone on the inside. Someone he trusts. Trusted, Kate corrected. After tonight, I doubt he'll ever trust me again. Good. That means you're free to do the right thing. Kate was quiet for a long moment, studying his face. You're serious about this? Dead serious. Your father has been destroying people for decades, hiding behind lawyers and shell companies and legitimate business practices. But you have access to information that could expose him. We could build cases against him, help his other victims, maybe even get some of them compensation. It would take years and it would cost millions. David smiled grimly. I've got time, and you've got money. Kate laughed, a sound caught between hysteria and hope. This is insane. Probably, but it's also right. David extended his hand to her. What do you say? Kate partners. Kate looked at his outstretched hand, then up at his face, around them. The wedding continued, the orchestra played. Guests danced. Waiters served champagne to people who'd never known a day of real struggle in their lives. She thought about her father's words. Everything you have is built on decisions like that one. She thought about David's words. Let's build something better. And she thought about the little girl named Sophie who needed surgery to save her life, paid for with money that had originally been stolen from her father. Kate reached out and shook David's hand. Partners, she said. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced smiles and polite conversation. Kate and David moved through the wedding reception like actors playing their roles. But everything had changed. The pretense of their relationship had been replaced by something else, a shared purpose, a mutual understanding, and something that felt dangerously close to trust. They danced when the orchestra played slow songs, Kate's hand warm in David's, her body fitting against his in a way that felt both natural and electrifying. They made small talk with other guests, deflecting questions about their relationship with practiced ease. They ate dinner at a table full of Dallas society fixtures who treated David with polite curiosity and Kate with carefully calculated respect. But beneath the surface, both of them were thinking about what came next. As the evening wound down, they found themselves on the terrace overlooking the estate's gardens. The night air was warm and sweet with the scent of jasmine, and the sounds of the party seemed muted and distant. So, Kate said, leaning against the stone balustrade, what happens now? Now I go home to my daughter and try to explain why Daddy was gone so long, David replied. And tomorrow, you and I start figuring out how to take down a man who spent decades believing he's untouchable. Kate nodded. It won't be easy. My father has connections everywhere, judges, politicians, business leaders. He's got enough dirt on enough people to protect himself from almost anything. Almost anything, David repeated, but not everything. What makes you so confident? David was quiet for a moment, looking out over the manicured gardens. 6 years ago, I lost everything because I trusted the wrong person and underestimated the capacity for evil in people I thought I knew. But I learned something from that experience. The same arrogance that makes people like your father feel invincible also makes them careless. They start to believe their own myths, think they're too smart to be caught. And you think my father has made that mistake? I think your father has been making that mistake for decades. The question is whether we're smart enough and patient enough to catch him in it. Kate turned to face him fully. David, I need you to understand something. If we do this, if we really go after my father, there's no going back. He'll come after both of us with everything he has. He'll try to destroy your reputation, your livelihood, your relationship with Sophie. He'll make your life hell. David's smile was grim. Kate, my life has been hell for 6 years. At least now I'll be fighting back. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the lights of Dallas twinkle in the distance. Finally, Kate spoke again. There's something else we need to discuss. What's that? Us. This arrangement. I mean, Kate's voice was carefully neutral. Tonight was supposed to be a one-time thing. I pay you $45,000. You help me stick it to my ex, and we go our separate ways. That was the deal, David agreed. But now we're talking about working together long-term, which changes things. David turned to look at her. How so? Kate hesitated, as if searching for the right words. I don't want you to feel obligated to continue this charade because of what we're planning. The business partnership is separate from whatever this is. She gestured between them. "What do you think this is?" David asked quietly. Kate's breath caught. It was a dangerous question, one that could change everything between them. She looked at David, really looked at him, taking in the strong line of his jaw, the way the moonlight brought out the silver in his hair, the steadiness in his storm gray eyes. "I think," she said carefully, "that what started as a business arrangement has become something more complicated." "Complicated how?" Kate's laugh was shaky. "David, I hired you to be my fake boyfriend for one night, but the way you defended me against Marcus, the way you stood up to Richard, the way you looked at my father." She trailed off, shaking her head. "No one's ever protected me like that before. Maybe because you've never needed protecting before. That's just it. I didn't think I did. I've spent my whole adult life being strong, being independent, being the woman who doesn't need anyone." Kate's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "But tonight, having you beside me, knowing that someone had my back, it felt good, really good." David stepped closer. "Kate, I'm not saying I'm in love with you," she said quickly. "We barely know each other, and the circumstances of how we met are completely insane. But I'm attracted to you, and I respect you, and I think you might be the most genuinely good man I've ever met." David's hand found hers. "For the record, the attraction is mutual, and the respect. But, but you're right, this is complicated. You're a billionaire CEO. I'm a maintenance worker with a 7-year-old daughter and more baggage than most people can handle. Even if we weren't about to become business partners in what amounts to a war against your father, we'd be coming at this from completely different worlds." Kate's heart sank, though she tried not to let it show. "So you think we should keep things professional?" "I think," David said, lifting her hand to his lips and pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles, "that we should take this one day at a time and see what happens. No expectations, no pressure, just possibilities." Kate felt something flutter in her chest, hope. Maybe, or the beginning of something that could grow into love given time and care. "I can live with possibilities," she said. David smiled, the first completely unguarded smile she'd seen from him all evening. "Good, because I have a feeling we're going to have plenty of them." From inside the ballroom came the sound of the orchestra playing The Last Dance. Kate and David could see couples swaying together through the French doors, including Richard and Amanda, who moved together with the mechanical precision of two people going through the motions. "Do you regret it?" David asked. "Coming here tonight, confronting Richard and your father?" Kate considered the question. "No. Richard needed to hear those things, even if he'll never admit it. And my father." She paused. "Maybe it was time someone stood up to him." "And how do you feel about Amanda?" Kate watched the new bride dancing with her husband, noting the sadness in the younger woman's posture. "I feel sorry for her. She married a man who doesn't love her, and now she knows it. That's a hard truth to live with." "Think she'll leave him?" "I hope so. She's young, she's beautiful, and she's rich enough to be independent. She could have a real life if she's brave enough to choose it." David nodded. "Sometimes the hardest thing is admitting you made a mistake and starting over." "Is that what you did after your company collapsed?" "Eventually. It took me a while to stop being angry and start being useful again." David's expression grew thoughtful. "But yeah, there comes a point where you have to decide whether you're going to let your past define your future, or whether you're going to write a new story." Kate looked at him with something that might have been wonder. "Is that what we're doing? Writing a new story?" "I think so. The question is, what kind of story do we want it to be?" Before Kate could answer, her phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and frowned. "What is it?" David asked. "A message from my head of security. He says there are photographers outside the estate trying to get pictures of us leaving together." Kate's expression grew troubled. "David, I should have warned you after tonight. You're going to be a public figure whether you want to be or not. The Dallas Society pages will be full of speculation about us, and my father's people will probably start digging into your background." David shrugged. "Let them dig. I've got nothing to hide." But Sophie's tough, and she's smart enough to understand that sometimes Daddy has to do difficult things for important reasons. David's expression grew serious. But you're right to be concerned. If we're really going to do this, go after your father. Become partners, then we need to be prepared for the fallout, both personally and professionally. Kate nodded. Tomorrow, we start planning, but tonight, she looked back toward the ballroom, where the last dance was ending and guests were beginning to make their farewells. Tonight, I think we've done enough damage. David offered her his arm. Shall we make our grand exit, Ms. Sterling? Kate slipped her hand through his elbow, feeling the solid strength of him beneath the expensive fabric of his suit. Let's give them something to talk about, Mr. Morrison. They walked back into the ballroom together, heads high, ready to face whatever cameras and questions awaited them outside. The evening that had begun as a charade had become something else entirely, a declaration of war, a promise of partnership, and the first chapter of a story that neither of them could have imagined when they'd first shaken hands in a broken elevator. As they said their goodbyes and made their way toward the exit, David caught a glimpse of Amanda Blackwood standing alone by the French doors. Still in her wedding dress, but with her bouquet nowhere to be seen. She was staring out at the garden with an expression of profound sadness. And for a moment, David felt genuinely sorry for her. Then Kate's hand tightened on his arm, and they were walking out into the night, past the photographers and the whispered conversations and the glittering facade of Dallas high society. Ready for this? Kate asked as the valet brought around her car. David looked back at the estate one last time, thinking about the confrontations, the revelations, and the promises made in moonlight. Then he looked at Kate, this complicated, powerful, vulnerable woman who'd hired him for one night and ended up offering him a chance at justice. Yeah, he said. I'm ready. 3 weeks later, David Morrison stood in the gleaming conference room of Sterling Properties, surrounded by file boxes, legal documents, and the kind of evidence that could bring down empires. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating dust motes that danced like possibilities in the air. Kate sat across from him, her laptop open, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that made her look younger and more determined than he'd ever seen her. Tell me again why we're doing this here, David said, gesturing around the conference room. In your father's building, using his resources to investigate his crimes. Kate's smile was sharp. Because it's poetic justice, and because he'd never expect us to be this bold. She tapped a stack of documents. Besides, everything we're finding is technically Sterling Properties business. I have every right to review these files as CEO. Acting CEO, David corrected. Your father's been fighting the board's decision to remove him. Let him fight. He'll lose. Kate's voice carried absolute certainty. Half the board members have daughters. David, when they see what we've uncovered about his methods, the families he's destroyed, the communities he's displaced, they'll realize they don't want to be associated with that legacy. David picked up a photograph from one of the files of family standing in front of a house with a sold sign in the yard, their faces tight with the kind of desperation that comes from having no choices left. The Gonzalez family, Sterling Development, bought their neighborhood through shell companies, promised them fair market value for their homes, then lowballed them when the contracts came through. Forced gentrification, Kate said, her voice heavy with disgust. They'd done it to 12 different neighborhoods over the past 8 years. Low-income families, mostly immigrant communities, people who didn't have the resources to fight back. Until now, David set down the photograph and picked up another file. I've been in touch with Maria Gonzalez. She's organizing the other families, and they're willing to testify if we can get this to court. Kate looked up from her laptop. We'll get it to court. I've been corresponding with the FBI's white-collar crime division. They're very interested in what we found. The door to the conference room opened. Ann Jennifer, Kate's assistant, peeked in nervously. Ms. Sterling, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here to see you. She says it's urgent. I'm not taking meetings today. Jennifer, can you reschedule? It's Amanda Blackwood, Jennifer said quietly. And she looks, well, She looks like she's been crying. Kate and David exchanged glances. Send her in, Kate said. A moment later, Amanda appeared in the doorway, and David barely recognized her. Gone was the radiant bride from 3 weeks ago. This Amanda looked hollow-eyed and fragile, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, her expensive clothes wrinkled as if she'd slept in them. Kate, Amanda said, her voice hoarse. I'm sorry to bother you, but I didn't know where else to go. Kate stood immediately, her professional demeanor softening. Amanda, what's wrong? Are you hurt? Not physically. Amanda's laugh was bitter. May I sit down? This is difficult. Kate gestured to a chair, and Amanda sank into it gratefully. David started to gather up the files, but Amanda waved him off. No, please don't. What you said at the wedding about Richard marrying me for my family's money, you were right. Amanda's voice cracked. I've been such a fool. Amanda, Kate said gently, taking the seat beside her. What happened? Amanda took a shaky breath. 3 days after the wedding, I overheard Richard on the phone with someone. He was talking about the merger, how marrying me gave him access to the Hartwell Properties portfolio, how he could use our combined assets to make a play for Sterling Properties. Kate went very still. He wants to buy Sterling Properties, not buy, destroy. Amanda looked up, her eyes red-rimmed but determined. He's been planning this for months. Kate, the marriage, the merger, all of it. He wants to ruin you the way you ruined him, his words, not mine. David leaned forward. Amanda, are you saying Richard orchestrated this entire thing as revenge against Kate? Yes, and when I confronted him about it, he... Amanda's voice trailed off, and she touched her cheek gingerly. Kate's eyes flashed with fury. He hit you. Just once. But it was enough. Amanda straightened her shoulders. I left him that night, took nothing but my car and my phone. I've been staying at a hotel, trying to figure out what to do next. Have you filed for divorce? David asked. My lawyer's drawing up the papers, but Richard's threatening to fight it, to drag it out in court, to make everything public. Amanda looked at Kate with something like desperation. He said he has dirt on my family, things that could destroy my father's business if they came to light. Kate was quiet for a long moment, studying Amanda's face. What do you want from me? Amanda, I want to help you stop him. Amanda's voice grew stronger. I know I don't have any right to ask for your forgiveness, and I know you have no reason to trust me, but I have access to Richard's files, his computer, his business records. If you're looking for evidence of wrongdoing, I might be able to get it for you. David and Kate exchanged another look. This was an unexpected development, and potentially a dangerous one. Amanda, Kate said carefully, what you're suggesting could be illegal, and it would definitely be dangerous. If Richard found out, he's already threatened me. What's the worst he could do? Hit me again. Amanda's laugh was hollow. Besides, I'm not suggesting anything illegal. As his wife, I have access to our shared files, our joint accounts. If I happen to notice some irregularities and report them to the appropriate authorities, you'd risk everything to help us, David asked. Amanda met his eyes. Mr. Morrison, at my wedding, you said that Richard married me for my connections and my money. You were right, but you know what the worst part is. I knew it. Deep down, I knew it, and I married him anyway because I was afraid of being alone. She turned to Kate. I spent my whole life being the perfect daughter, the perfect debutante, the perfect trophy wife. I've never done anything brave, anything that mattered. Maybe it's time I started. Kate studied Amanda's face for a long moment, then made a decision. Okay, but we do this carefully, and we do it legally. No breaking and entering, no stealing documents, just careful observation and reporting of anything that seems suspicious. Amanda nodded eagerly. What do you need me to look for? David pulled out a legal pad and began writing. Financial irregularities, payments to shell companies, communications with William Sterling or any Sterling Property subsidiaries, anything that might suggest conspiracy or fraud. I can do that. Amanda paused. There's something else. Richard's been meeting with someone regularly, a man named Marcus Webb. They have dinner every Tuesday at the Dallas Club. Very secretive, very intense conversations. David's pen stopped moving. Marcus Webb, you know him, Amanda asked. He's my former business partner, David said grimly. The one who sold me out to Sterling Development. Kate leaned back in her chair. So Richard and Marcus are working together? That's not a coincidence. No, it's not. David's mind was racing. Marcus has inside knowledge of how Sterling Properties operates. He was there when they bought out my company. And Richard has legal expertise and connections throughout Dallas. They're building a case against my father, Kate realized, or planning some kind of coordinated attack. Amanda nodded. From what I overheard, they're planning something big for next month. Some kind of announcement or revelation that would destroy both Sterling Properties and your reputation. Kate, what kind of announcement? Kate asked. I don't know, but Richard seemed very confident that it would be the end of what he called the Sterling dynasty. David stood and began pacing. We need more information. Amanda, how close can you get to Richard's files without arousing suspicion? He's been staying late at the office every night, working on this project. I could go to his office under the pretense of bringing him dinner. Maybe get a look at what he's working on. Absolutely not, Kate said immediately. Amanda, that's too dangerous. If he caught you, he won't catch me. Richard thinks I'm a helpless little rich girl who can't tie her shoes without help. He'd never suspect me of espionage. David stopped pacing. There might be another way. Amanda, does Richard keep files at home? Yes, he has a home office, but it's always locked when he's not there. What about when he's there? Do you have access then? Amanda thought for a moment. Sometimes, when he's on conference calls, he leaves the door open, and he keeps everything on his computer. He's always been paranoid about paper trails. Kate was shaking her head. This is getting too complicated and too dangerous. Amanda, I appreciate the offer, but I can't ask you to put yourself at risk for my family's problems. They're not just your family's problems anymore, Amanda said firmly. Richard used me, lied to me, and when I found out the truth, he hit me. This is personal now. David sat back down, studying Amanda's face. 3 weeks ago, she'd been a sheltered socialite playing dress-up at her dream wedding. Now she was sitting in a corporate conference room, offering to spy on her abusive husband. People could change. He realized. Sometimes trauma stripped away everything that wasn't essential, leaving only the core of who someone really was. If we do this, he said slowly, we do it smart. No unnecessary risks, no heroics. You observe, you report, and if anything feels dangerous, you walk away immediately. Agreed, Amanda said. Kate still looked uncertain. Amanda, are you sure about this once we start down this path? There's no going back. Richard will never forgive you. Amanda's smile was sad but determined. Kate, Richard stopped being my husband the moment he hit me. Now he's just another problem that needs solving. 2 days later, David was at home helping Sophie with her homework when his phone rang. The number was blocked, but something made him answer it anyway. David Morrison. His voice was cautious. Mr. Morrison, this is Amanda. I'm calling from a payphone because I think Richard might be monitoring my cell phone. David's blood chilled. Are you safe? For now, but I found something you need to know about immediately. Can you meet me somewhere public? Somewhere with lots of people. David checked his watch. It was 6:30, and Mrs. Chen had agreed to watch Sophie until 8. The Barnes & Noble at North Park Mall, 2nd floor, coffee shop. I can be there in 20 minutes. I'll be there. David hung up and turned to Sophie, who was coloring a picture of a house with purple trees and a rainbow sky. Little bird, I have to go out for a bit. Mrs. Chen is going to come over and finish homework time with you, okay? Sophie looked up with serious eyes. Is it about the lady with the shiny shoes? David knelt down beside her chair. How did you know that? Because you get a different voice when you talk about her, like when you used to talk about Mommy, but nicer. The observation hit David like a punch to the chest. Sophie, it's okay. Daddy, I like the lady. She sent me that card. Remember the one that said she hoped my heart felt better soon? David did remember. Kate had sent Sophie a get well card after learning about her upcoming surgery, along with a stuffed elephant that now sat on Sophie's nightstand. It had been a simple gesture, but it had meant the world to his daughter. Yeah, it's about Kate, David admitted. She might be in some trouble, and I need to help her. Sophie nodded solemnly. Good people help each other. That's right, little bird. Good people help each other. 25 minutes later, David found Amanda sitting in a corner booth at the Barnes & Noble cafe, nervously stirring a cup of tea. She looked even more haggard than she had 2 days ago, and David noticed she was wearing sunglasses despite being indoors. Amanda, he slid into the seat across from her. Are you okay? She removed the sunglasses, revealing a fading bruise around her left eye. Richard came home last night. He'd been drinking, and he was angry about something. When I asked him about it, she gestured vaguely at her face. David felt rage building in his chest. Amanda, you need to file a police report. This has gone beyond business disputes. He's assaulting you. I know, and I will. But first, you need to see this. Amanda pulled a manila folder from her purse and slid it across the table. I managed to copy some files from Richard's computer while he was passed out drunk. David opened the folder and felt his blood turn to ice. The first document was a legal brief titled Criminal Conspiracy and RICO Violations, the Sterling Properties Case. The second was a comprehensive financial analysis of Sterling Properties acquisitions over the past decade. The third was a list of names people who'd been harmed by Sterling's business practices, including several David didn't recognize. Jesus, David whispered. Amanda, where did he get all this information? That's not the worst part. Amanda pointed to the bottom of the legal brief. Look at the signature line. David's eyes widened. The brief was prepared by the law firm of Blackwood, Webb and Associates. Marcus is working for Richard's law firm now. Not just working for it, he's a partner. They formed the firm 6 months ago, specifically to build this case against Sterling Properties. Amanda leaned forward. David, they're not just planning to destroy Kate's company, they're planning to have her arrested. David flipped through more pages, his heart sinking with each revelation. The case they'd built was thorough, professional, and devastating. They had financial records, witness statements, even what appeared to be recorded phone conversations. How long have they been working on this? David asked. According to the timestamps on these files, at least 2 years. They've been planning this since before Richard and I even started dating. Amanda's voice was hollow. My entire relationship with him was part of this scheme. He courted me to get access to my family's resources and connections. David was quiet for a moment, absorbing the implications. Amanda, this changes everything. If they present this case to the authorities, Kate goes to prison, Sterling Properties gets seized by the federal government, and Richard and Marcus emerge as the whistleblowers who expose corporate corruption. Amanda's laugh was bitter. They'll probably get commendations. Unless we stop them first. David closed the folder and looked at Amanda. How much time do we have? The brief is dated next Friday. I think that's when they're planning to present their case to the FBI. 6 days. David's mind raced through possibilities, strategies, contingencies. They needed to warn Kate immediately, but they also needed to be smart about this. Richard and Marcus had spent 2 years building their case. They wouldn't be able to dismantle it in 6 days through conventional means. Amanda, I need you to do something for me, and it's going to be dangerous. Amanda straightened her shoulders. What do you need? I need you to keep pretending to be the helpless, oblivious wife for a few more days. Can you do that? I've been doing it for months. A few more days won't kill me. It might. Literally. If Richard suspects you're on to him, he won't. He thinks he gave me just enough of a beating to keep me in line. Amanda's voice was steady, but David could see the fear in her eyes. What do you need me to find out? Details about their timeline, how they're planning to present the case, who they're presenting it to. Whether they have any backup plans if their primary strategy fails? David paused. And Amanda, we need evidence that they've been fabricating or manipulating some of this information. There's no way they have legitimate access to all these Sterling Properties internal documents. Amanda nodded. I'll see what I can find. But David, what if I can't get enough information? What if their case is actually solid? David was quiet for a long moment. Then Kate and I have 1 week to disappear, or we spend the next 20 years in federal prison. Kate was in her kitchen, eating ice cream directly from the container. When David called her at midnight, "We have a problem," he said without preamble. "What kind of problem?" "The kind that involves federal prison and the complete destruction of everything you've worked for." Kate set down her ice cream. "I'll be right over." "No, not here. Sophie's asleep, and I don't want her to overhear this. Can you meet me at your office?" "At midnight." "Kate, this can't wait until morning." 30 minutes later. They sat in Kate's executive office, the city lights of Dallas twinkling below them like stars. David spread Amanda's copies across Kate's desk and watched her face change as she absorbed the magnitude of what Richard and Marcus had built. 2 years, Kate said finally. They've been planning this for 2 years. At least, maybe longer. David pointed to one of the financial documents. Look at this analysis of the Morrison & Associates acquisition. They have internal Sterling Properties memos that were supposed to be confidential. Someone inside your company has been feeding them information. Kate studied the documents more closely. These memos, I recognize the formatting. They're from my father's personal files. The only people who would have access to them are senior vice presidents and above, maybe 8 people in the entire company. Kate's face went pale. David, if one of my senior staff has been working with Richard, then this goes deeper than we thought. David sat back in his chair. Kate, we need to consider the possibility that this isn't just about revenge. What if someone inside Sterling Properties has been planning a coup? What if Richard and Marcus are just the front men for a larger conspiracy? Kate walked to her window, staring out at the city her family had helped build. My father always said that in business. There are no friends, only temporary allies. I thought he was being cynical. Maybe he was being realistic. Kate turned back to David. So what do? We have 6 days before they present their case to the FBI. Even if we could prove some kind of internal conspiracy, we don't have time to build a counter case. David was quiet for a moment, thinking, what if we don't try to build a counter case? What if we give them exactly what they want? I don't follow. They want to destroy Sterling Properties and see you go to prison. What if we let them think they're succeeding? Kate stared at him. You're talking about faking my own downfall. I'm talking about controlling the narrative. If we know when and how they're going to present their case, we can be ready for it. We can have our own evidence prepared, our own witnesses lined up, our own story to tell. David, that's incredibly risky. If we miscalculate, if they have evidence we don't know about, then we're no worse off than we are right now. David leaned forward. Kate, think about it. Right now, we're reacting to their timeline, their strategy. But if we can get ahead of them, if we can present our own case first. Kate began pacing, her mind racing through possibilities. We'd need irrefutable evidence of their conspiracy. We'd need to prove that they've been manipulating information, that the internal Sterling Properties documents were stolen. And we'd need to do it in a way that doesn't implicate Amanda. If they find out she's been helping us, Richard will kill her. Kate's voice was flat. David, we can't ask her to take that risk. We're not asking. She's volunteering. And honestly, I think she's in more danger if we don't act than if we do. Richard is already escalating the violence. How long before he seriously hurts her? Kate was quiet for a long moment. What do you need from me? I need you to trust me. And I need you to be prepared to make some very difficult decisions over the next few days. What kind of decisions? David met her eyes. The kind that might save us all, or destroy us completely. Kate studied his face, this man who'd entered her life 3 weeks ago as a paid escort and was now asking her to bet everything on a desperate gamble. But as she looked at him, she realized something: she did trust him, completely and without reservation. "Okay," she said. "What's the plan?" David smiled grimly. "First, we're going to give Richard and Marcus exactly what they want: a confession." The next morning, Kate called an emergency board meeting at Sterling Properties. David waited in her office, watching through the glass walls as the company's senior executives filed into the conference room with expressions ranging from curious to concerned to calculating. "See anyone who looks guilty?" Kate asked, joining him at the window. "Hard to tell. Corporate executives are good at hiding their true feelings." Kate was dressed for battle, a charcoal gray suit that conveyed authority, her hair pulled back in a severe bun, her makeup flawless. But David could see the tension in her shoulders, the slight tremor in her hands. "You sure about this?" he asked. "No, but I'm sure about you." Kate's smile was quick and nervous. "If this works, you're brilliant. If it doesn't, we'll face whatever comes next together." Kate's expression softened. "David, before I go in there, I need to tell you something. What 1 to 3 weeks ago, I hired you to make my ex-boyfriend jealous. But somewhere along the way, this stopped being about Richard and started being about us." David stepped closer. "Kate, I'm falling in love with you," she said quietly. "I know the timing is terrible, and I know we're in the middle of a crisis, but I needed you to know, just in case." David cupped her face in his hands. "Just in case nothing. We're going to get through this, and then we're going to figure out what comes next. Together." He kissed her then, soft and sure and full of promises, when they broke apart. Kate's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I love you too," David said. "Now go show them who you really are." Kate straightened her shoulders, transformed before his eyes back into the formidable CEO who'd built an empire. "Wish me luck." "You don't need luck. You've got something better. You've got the truth." Kate walked into the conference room, and David settled in to watch the performance of her lifetime. "Ladies and gentlemen," Kate began, her voice carrying clearly through the glass, "I've called this emergency meeting because I've discovered some disturbing irregularities in Sterling Properties' acquisition practices over the past decade." The board members exchanged glances. David studied their faces, looking for tells, for signs of guilt or surprise or fear. "I've been conducting an internal audit," Kate continued, "and I found evidence of potentially criminal activity in several of our major acquisitions. Fraud, conspiracy, racketeering, the kind of charges that could result in federal prosecution and the complete dissolution of this company." Now the room erupted in murmurs and questions. David saw William Sterling shift uncomfortably in his seat, saw several other board members lean forward with obvious concern. "The good news," Kate said, raising her voice above the chatter, "is that I believe these activities were conducted without the knowledge or consent of the current board. The bad news is that ignorance won't protect us if federal investigators come calling." Board member Harold Chen raised his hand. "Kate, what exactly are you alleging?" "I'm alleging that someone with high-level access to Sterling Properties has been systematically manipulating our acquisition process to defraud property owners and circumvent federal regulations. Someone has been using shell companies to hide the true ownership of properties, forcing below-market sales through intimidation and legal manipulation, and then covering up the evidence through fraudulent documentation." David watched William Sterling's face go pale. He also noticed that the company's CFO, Janet Morrison, no relation, was taking very detailed notes, more detailed than seemed necessary for someone hearing this information for the first time. "I'm recommending," Kate continued, "that we immediately contact federal authorities and volunteer full cooperation with any investigation they deem necessary. I'd rather Sterling Properties be seen as a reformed company that exposed its own corruption than as a criminal enterprise that fought to hide its crimes." The room fell silent. Then board member Patricia Vance spoke up. "Kate, these are very serious allegations. Do you have concrete evidence?" "I do, and I'll be presenting that evidence to the FBI on Friday morning." David felt his heart skip. Friday morning, the same day Richard and Marcus were planning to present their case, Kate was forcing their hand, making them react to her timeline instead of following their own. I'm also recommending, Kate said, that we conduct an immediate internal investigation to determine how this information might have been leaked to outside parties. There's evidence that confidential Sterling Properties documents have been shared with individuals who have no legitimate access to them. Now David saw a flicker of panic in CFO Janet Morrison's eyes. She was trying to hide it, but she was definitely nervous about something. The investigation will include polygraph tests for all senior staff with access to confidential files. Kate added, participation will be voluntary, but refusal to participate will be noted. Janet Morrison's pen stopped moving. Are there any questions? Kate asked. William Sterling leaned forward. Catherine, these allegations could destroy the company even if they're ultimately proven false. Are you certain this is the best course of action? I'm certain that the truth is always the best course of action, Kate replied, even when it's painful. William's eyes narrowed. And what if the truth implicates more people than you expect? What if this investigation reveals information that damages innocent parties? Then we'll deal with those consequences as they arise. But we won't hide from the truth anymore. David saw something pass between father and daughter, a moment of understanding that spoke of old battles and deep wounds. William Sterling was warning his daughter about something, but Kate wasn't backing down. The meeting ended with a vote to authorize Kate's recommended actions. The vote was unanimous, but David noticed that Janet Morrison abstained, claiming a conflict of interest as the board members filed out. David saw Janet Morrison approach William Sterling. They spoke in hushed tones for a moment, then both left separately, but not before David caught the look of desperate panic on Janet's face. 20 minutes later, Kate returned to her office, looking drained but determined. How did I do? She asked. Brilliantly, and I think we found our leak. Kate raised an eyebrow. Janet Morrison. She was taking very detailed notes. She looked panicked when you mentioned polygraph tests, and she abstained from the vote. Plus, she stayed after to talk to your father. Kate nodded slowly. Janet's been with the company for 15 years. She has access to everything, including my father's personal files, and she's been having financial problems lately. Divorce, custody battle, mounting legal fees. Perfect candidate for bribery. Or blackmail. Kate walked to her desk and opened her laptop. I'm going to do some digging into Janet's recent financial activity, and I'm going to move up our timeline. What do you mean? Kate's smile was sharp. I mean, we're not waiting until Friday to present our case to the FBI. We're doing it today. At 3 o'clock that afternoon, FBI Special Agent Maria Santos sat in Kate's conference room. Reviewing the evidence that Kate and David had compiled over the past 3 weeks, Agent Santos was a small, intense woman with sharp eyes and the kind of quiet authority that came from years of investigating white-collar crime. This is comprehensive work, Agent Santos said, looking up from the files. But I have to ask, why come to us now? Why not handle this internally? Kate exchanged a glance with David. Because we have reason to believe that some of the evidence against Sterling Properties has been fabricated or stolen, and that there's a larger conspiracy at work. What kind of conspiracy? David leaned forward. Agent Santos, I'm the victim of one of Sterling Properties' questionable acquisitions. 6 years ago, they destroyed my company and my life. I have every reason to want revenge against this family. Agent Santos nodded. I'm aware of your history, Mr. Morrison. I've read the files. 3 weeks ago, Kate hired me to be her date to her ex-fiance's wedding. We were supposed to make him jealous and then go our separate ways. But we ended up uncovering evidence that her ex-fiance and my former business partner have been working together to build a criminal case against Sterling Properties. And you think this case is fabricated? We think it's a mixture of real evidence and manufactured evidence. Kate said, my father and this company have definitely done things wrong. But Richard Blackwood and Marcus Webb have been systematically gathering information for 2 years, using inside sources and potentially illegal methods. Agent Santos was taking notes. Tell me about these inside sources. David pulled out copies of Amanda's photographs. These internal Sterling Properties memos were supposedly confidential, but they appear in Richard Blackwood's files. We believe someone inside the company has been feeding information to Blackwood and Webb. Do you know who? We have suspicions, but no proof yet, Kate admitted. Agent Santos. We're coming to you because we want to do the right thing, but we also want to make sure that when justice is served, it's real justice, not manipulated justice. Agent Santos was quiet for a long moment, studying the documents. Ms. Sterling, Mr. Morrison, what you're describing could constitute multiple federal crimes conspiracy, wire fraud, potentially RICO violations. Are you prepared for the possibility that our investigation might result in criminal charges against both of you? Kate's voice was steady. If we've committed crimes, then we should face the consequences. But if we've been set up, or if the evidence against us has been manipulated, then we want that exposed too. Agent Santos nodded. I'm going to need to interview both of you separately, and I'm going to need access to all of Sterling Properties' financial records for the past 10 years. Done, Kate said. I'm also going to need to speak with your source inside the Blackwood investigation, the person who provided you with these documents. David's stomach clenched. Agent Santos, our source is in a very dangerous situation. Her husband has already begun physically abusing her. If he finds out she's cooperated with us. Mr. Morrison, I understand your concern, but if this woman has evidence of a criminal conspiracy, she needs federal protection, and she needs it now. Kate pulled out her phone. I'll call her. 20 minutes later, Amanda Blackwood sat in Kate's conference room, her bruised face telling its own story. Agent Santos took one look at her and immediately called for a domestic violence advocate and a medical photographer. Mrs. Blackwood, Agent Santos said gently, I need you to tell me everything you know about your husband's activities over the past 2 years. Amanda took a shaky breath and began to talk. She told Agent Santos about the secret meetings with Marcus Webb, about the files she discovered, about Richard's plans to present his case to the FBI on Friday. But most importantly, she told Agent Santos about the conversation she'd overheard the night before. Richard was on the phone with someone, I think it was Marcus, but I'm not sure. He was angry about something, saying that their timeline had been moved up because Kate was getting suspicious. He said they needed to present their case immediately. Before anyone could discredit their evidence, Agent Santos looked up sharply. When is immediately? Tomorrow morning. Richard left the house at 5 this morning with several boxes of files. He said he was going to the FBI field office. David felt his blood turn to ice. Agent Santos, if Richard presents his case first, then you'll all be arrested before we can complete our investigation into the conspiracy allegations. Agent Santos stood. Mrs. Blackwood, I'm placing you in protective custody immediately. Mr. Sterling, Mr. Morrison, I need you to come with me to the field office. We're going to have a very long night ahead of us. As they prepared to leave, Kate pulled David aside. Whatever happens, she said, I want you to know that these past 3 weeks have been the best of my life. David kissed her forehead. They're not ending. Kate, this is just the beginning. But as they walked out of Sterling Properties together, surrounded by FBI agents, David couldn't shake the feeling that everything they'd built was about to come crashing down. The FBI field office at 2 in the morning was a surreal place, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the smell of stale coffee and stressed sweat in the air, and the constant hum of activity as agents worked around the clock to unravel the conspiracy that had consumed all their lives. David sat in an interview room, going over his story for the 3rd time with Agent Santos and her partner, Agent Williams. His throat was dry, his eyes burned from exhaustion, but he forced himself to stay focused. Everything depended on getting this right. Let me make sure I understand, Agent Williams said, consulting his notes. 6 years ago, Sterling Development Partners, a subsidiary of Sterling Properties, acquired your company through what you believe was fraudulent means. Not fraudulent, exactly. Legally questionable, but technically legitimate. David rubbed his temples. Marcus Webb, my business partner. Used power of attorney documents to sell the company out from under me. The sale itself was legal, but it was based on information that Marcus had obtained through corporate espionage. And you believe William Sterling was directly involved in this espionage? I know he was. Kate found the authorization documents with his signature on them. Agent Santos leaned forward. Mr. Morrison, help me understand something. You have every reason to want revenge against the Sterling family. Why should we believe that you're not part of Richard Blackwood's conspiracy? David was quiet for a moment. Agent Santos, 6 years ago. I lost everything because I trusted the wrong person. I swore I'd never make that mistake again. But then I met Kate, and I realized that not trusting anyone isn't the same as being smart. It's just another way of being broken. That doesn't answer my question. The answer is this: if I wanted revenge against the Sterlings, I wouldn't need to manufacture evidence. There's plenty of real evidence. William Sterling has been destroying people's lives for decades. But the difference between justice and revenge is that justice doesn't require innocent people to suffer. Agent Santos made a note. And you consider Kate Sterling innocent. I consider Kate Sterling someone who inherited a legacy she didn't create and is trying to do the right thing with it. If that's a crime, then we're all in trouble. Down the hall, Kate was having her own interview with 2 other agents through the glass window of his interview room. David could see her sitting ramrod straight, her hands folded in her lap, answering questions with the same precise control she brought to everything else. At 3:30 in the morning, Agent Santos returned to David's interview room with grim news. Richard Blackwood is here, she said. He arrived an hour ago with Marcus Webb and a team of lawyers. They're presenting their case to the U.S. Attorney's Office right now. David's heart sank. So we're too late? Not necessarily. The U.S. Attorney is a careful man. He won't move on charges this significant without a thorough review. But Blackwood's case is impressive, professional, detailed, comprehensive. What kind of charges are they recommending? Agent Santos consulted her notes. Conspiracy, wire fraud, money laundering, RICO violations. They're asking for immediate arrests and asset seizure. For Kate and me, for Kate, you, and William Sterling, they're portraying this as a family criminal enterprise with you as a recent recruit. David laughed bitterly. A recruit? I'm the victim. According to their narrative, you were recruited by Kate to help cover up Sterling Properties crimes in exchange for financial compensation and personal revenge against Marcus Webb. That's insane. Is it you were paid $45,000 by Kate Sterling? You've been working with her to investigate Sterling Properties business practices. And you have a documented history of conflict with Marcus Webb. Agent Santos's expression was sympathetic but serious. Mr. Morrison, from the outside, their story is plausible. David stared at the table, feeling the walls closing in around him. Agent Santos, what can we do? We can present our evidence of the conspiracy and hope it's enough to create reasonable doubt. But I'm going to be honest with you. Blackwood and Webb have been building their case for 2 years. You've been building yours for 3 weeks. What about Amanda? What about the evidence she provided? Amanda Blackwood is the estranged wife of one of the accusers, seeking a divorce and claiming domestic abuse. Her credibility will be questioned. David felt something cold settle in his stomach. So they're going to win. Not necessarily, but you need to understand that this is far from over, and the outcome is far from certain. At 4 in the morning, Kate and David were reunited in a conference room, where Agent Santos briefed them on Richard's presentation. The good news, Agent Santos said, is that the U.S. Attorney has agreed to delay any arrest warrants for 72 hours while we investigate your conspiracy allegations. The bad news, Kate asked. The bad news is that Richard's case is solid, even if we can prove that some of his evidence was obtained illegally. Enough of it appears to be legitimate that charges could still be filed. David reached for Kate's hand under the table. What happens in 72 hours? Either we find enough evidence to support your conspiracy theory, or you'll both be arrested on federal charges. Kate was quiet for a long moment. Agent Santos, there's something I need to tell you, something that might change everything. Agent Santos looked up from her notes. What is it? Kate took a deep breath. I've been recording all of my conversations with my father for the past 2 weeks. David stared at her. Kate, what are you talking about? After our first conversation about what Sterling Properties had done to you, I started carrying a digital recorder whenever I met with my father. I wanted evidence of his involvement in the company's questionable practices. Agent Santos leaned forward. Do you have these recordings with you? Kate pulled a small digital device from her purse. Everything's on here, including a conversation from yesterday where my father admits to authorizing the Morrison & Associates acquisition and several other questionable deals. David felt a surge of hope. Kate, why didn't you tell me about this? Because I wasn't sure I'd have the courage to use them. Recording your own father, admitting that your family's fortune is built on other people's suffering? Kate's voice trailed off. It's not easy. Agent Santos was already reaching for the recorder. Ms. Sterling, this could change everything. But I need you to understand that these recordings might also incriminate you. I know, but they'll also prove that David is telling the truth about what Sterling Properties did to him. And they might give you leverage against my father, maybe enough to get him to testify about Richard and Marcus's conspiracy. Agent Santos nodded grimly. Let's hope so, because right now, these recordings might be the only thing standing between you and federal prison. By sunrise, the FBI had extracted and analyzed Kate's recordings. David sat in the conference room, listening to William Sterling's voice confessing to decades of corporate crimes, and felt a mixture of vindication and sorrow. This was the proof he'd needed for 6 years, but hearing it came with a cost: the complete destruction of Kate's relationship with her father. This is excellent evidence, Agent Santos said, pausing the playback, but it raises as many questions as it answers. Mr. Sterling clearly authorized numerous questionable acquisitions, but he also mentions that someone else has been accessing his files without permission. Kate looked up from her coffee. What do you mean? Agent Santos replayed a section of the recording. Catherine, someone has been feeding information to outside parties, confidential documents that only a handful of people should have access to. I've been trying to identify the leak for months. Your father knew about the leak, Agent Santos said, but according to this recording, he didn't know who was responsible. David felt pieces clicking into place in his mind. Agent Santos, what if my father wasn't part of Richard's conspiracy? What if he was another target? Explain. Think about it. Richard wants to destroy the Sterling family. Why stop with Kate? If he can prove that William Sterling has been committing crimes for decades, he eliminates the entire family power structure. Kate was nodding slowly. And if my father is arrested along with me, Richard and his partners could move in and acquire Sterling Properties assets for pennies on the dollar. Agent Santos was taking notes rapidly. So you're suggesting that